Something you'll likely run into in the process of making stuff is the occasional desire to take a step in a brand new direction. But many times the motivation that you have for making these changes can be very, very difficult to convey to your readers or your viewers or your listeners. While there are some things that you can do to try and keep kind of the core of your audience with you and understanding you, there's almost always going to be a subset, a group, that doesn't get why you're changing things up and doesn't really go with you to the new places that you're trying to explore. Now, before we talk about the different approaches that you might take to bring your audience with you into these new directions that you may explore, it's worthwhile to ask why you would want to take new directions in the first place. I mean, with the potential risks of audience loss and mediocrity and just plain failure, what is there to drive us to move from the things that we're good at to things that we aren't really? In my estimation, there's not one, not two, but three reasons that you should push yourself and your audience out of your comfort and skill zone into new directions. First off, foundationally to the very essence of creating and working is the gratification of self-improvement. One of the things that keeps us interested in working and pushing and striving is the ability to see ourselves become better at something. And with creative works, we naturally create a timeline of increasing skill through what we've published. Challenging yourself by going in new directions and trying new things can allow you a new sort of field to try and improve in, a new sort of target and goal to keep you interested in continuing and persisting in creating art or creating video or creating whatever. Secondly, and specifically related to artistic and sort of personally fueled pursuits, new directions reflect our real life changes in interests and tastes. Many times a part of creative expression is expressing who we are in our essence and what we like. Something that I've heard a lot of creative individuals say, and something that I tell people who are getting started in creative pursuits, is pursue creating the type of art that you personally and individually enjoy. Even if initially you only have a vague sense of what you enjoy consuming in terms of content, it serves as a very powerful and innate guide to help you narrow down your selection of what you want your style to be and what you want your genre to be and what you want your conventions to be. The thing is, though, that when you take this approach, your standard for quality and the thing that you strive for is constantly changing as you discover new things. In music, you find new styles that you want to somehow integrate into your personal genre. In video, you find new presentation methods or cutting strategies or framing or lots of stuff. And naturally, as your tastes change and or refine, your focus changes in what you make and what you try to make. While this isn't necessarily conducive to developing a creative franchise, it does help you as a creator stay interested in your work, and many times it helps your creative works themselves continue to be at a very high level of passion and effort and hopefully quality. Because as long as you keep on exploring your medium, you never really have a reason to get lazy. Now, maybe you're saying your tastes don't really change. You kind of just stick with one genre and one style, and there's lots of variation within that style, so there really shouldn't be a need for you to kind of go beyond what you're familiar with. And that's a fair point, but the third reason that you should challenge yourself and your audience to go in new directions is that even though a subgenre or a subculture may have infinite interpretations and possibilities, you in that subgenre do not. For example, if you write rock songs and you only ever listen to rock music, the only sort of rhythm and harmony and melody that you have in your head is going to be limited to the interpretations of music that rock artists have had that you've listened to. And while you may be able to push to those boundaries that have been set by other rock artists that you have heard, it's going to be very difficult for you to naturally push those boundaries. However, if you listen to not only rock music, but electronic music and folk music and classical music, then you can hear things that rock artists may not have tried yet. And you can introduce into the rock ecosystem a musical idea that perhaps has been explored and utilized in other genres, but hasn't been used in rock that much. So there's lots of reasons to try to go in new directions. But there are two specific pitfalls that you have to avoid. First, you have to avoid publishing things before they're polished. When you've spent a lot of time in a creative form doing one thing and you've gotten pretty good at it, it can be easy to sort of assume when you move to something different in that same form that that level of expertise and taste transfers seamlessly from what you're familiar with to what you're unfamiliar with. This is very often not the case, and trying to figure out when something new that you're making is worth showing to people can be very hard. When you start in a new direction, it's best to try and ground yourself with people who are familiar with what you're trying to integrate, as well as people who are familiar with what you have already done in the past. It's very possible that neither group will fully understand what you're trying to do, but having advice from both sides of the issue can help you sort of, with some filtration, censor yourself a little bit in those early stages of making pretty terrible stuff. The second mistake you can make is to fail to really inform your audience of what you're doing. In its very essence, going in a new direction is betraying your audience's expectations of what you make and what you do. And even if that new direction is really, really good, even if you spend a lot of time polishing it, if you don't really let people know what's coming, they can feel sort of confused and betrayed. Thanks to social media, it's now really easy to keep interested parties informed as to what sort of genres or styles you're trying, what you're experimenting with, and what they should sort of expect to be coming. It was way back in like my third vlog back in January that I told you all about the electronic artists that I was really influenced by and gave you a little sample of some like solely electronic stuff that I was doing. I'm not trying to hold the illusion of being solely just a straight rock artist like I viewed myself back in 2011 when I released The Places I Go. I've been spending a lot of time with the new styles that I've been working with, and I'm hoping to give you guys a taste of what it is before the full album comes out. And that way, when it does come out, hopefully you can enjoy it more than you would if you were expecting The Places I Go Part 2. I'll finish off with a little bit of an anecdote of where I've seen this among other bands. Me Without You started as a very hardcore indie rock band with like yelling and guitars and very heavy rhythms, and it was really awesome. But in 2009, they took a very powerful and strong deviation from what they were doing and went into a kind of indie folk direction. Unfortunately, at that point, I wasn't really connected with social media, so I don't really know how well they announced what they were about to try. However, a few months ago, they released their newest album, 10 Stories, and they talked about why they were going in this newer, sort of less hardcore, almost screamo sort of musical direction. And if I'm remembering correctly, they said they wanted to write stuff that their parents or grandparents would enjoy listening to, as well as their more hardcore inspired fans. They wanted to make stuff that they could share with the people that they loved. And the time that they spent working on this sort of second foray into less hardcore music resulted in a really polished and nice fusion of the old and the new. It's a really quality set of songs. I'll link it down below so you can check it out. But the combination of dedication and just frank honesty for why they wanted to do what they were doing made me much more receptive to try and take their album for what it was and not for what it wasn't. In conclusion, you can't avoid losing people when going in new directions, but the possible costs are outweighed by the long-term benefits of continued interest and continued improvement and possible continued quality. And for many members of your core audience, simply being upfront and honest with what you're trying and experimenting with and why you're trying that can really help your audience not feel like you've sold out. This is Jacke Karashae, wishing you enriching new directions.